Welcome to E-commerce Spotlight, a podcast where we discuss all things e-commerce related, from dealing with head-scratching clients to getting ahead of the competition. Head puns intended, because today I'm joined by Konrad Kuceł from Naturaily to talk about headless commerce. How does it work and what benefits does it bring to e-commerce businesses? Well, let's find out. Hi, Konrad. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Adam. Thanks for having me. It's awesome to be here. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So before we kick off, Konrad, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, Naturaily, and your job there?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Konrad Kuceł, like you said, and to provide a brief kind of description of who I am, I've been working in the IT industry for over the past decade. I started my first job in an IT security, American IT security company. And over the past couple of years, I've actually transitioned into a more of a project-based, an agency role where at Naturaily, one of the key responsibilities I have is discussing businesses with our clients, their projects, their requirements for the projects, and helping them find the best technological solutions to answer those. So when it comes to Naturaily is a software and web development agency from Wrocław, Poland. We've been on the market for over the past 12 years. And a fun fact is our agency actually started out as a backend development company, mainly operating in Ruby on Rails technologies. Therefore, the name Naturaily, that's where it actually comes from. But over the past couple of years, we've shifted our focus and are currently focusing on several very specific service lines. We work with partners and companies from all around the world, ranging from smaller startups who are just beginning their scaling process, all the way up until, for example, some of the biggest PR agencies from around the world. When it comes to the specific service lines that we provide, one of them is using the headless Jamstack approach to building websites, web platforms. The second thing that we do is we are an e-commerce development agency. We specialize in Shopify Plus development, but besides that, we also specialize in creating headless storefronts for our clients and partners. And then the final thing that we do is we do operate with certain businesses on an ongoing basis where we allocate and help augment their teams. For example, they're not able to hire someone internally, so our developers are able to fill those gaps and make sure that the products or projects that the work they need to have completed are completed and their time to market is increased. One of the things I just wanted to mention as well is Naturaily has actually been awarded as one of the best software development companies globally around the world in both 2021 and 2022, according to Clutch.co. So that's probably, you've heard of Clutch, it's the ranking website. And we are official partners of some of the latest or leading technologies in the headless space. One of them being Storyblock, Sanity CMS, and of course other providers like Vercel. Are some of the partners and solutions that we operate with.
Great. Thank you much for this introduction of you and of your company. And so let's start with the basics today, because our topic today is about the headless e-commerce. So what it is and how does it work? But maybe first thing, why is it called headless?
Right. So maybe to start off with a quick explanation as to why is it called headless. Well, what it essentially comes down to is first identifying three major aspects of building any software or web solution. We have three components. One of them is front end. The other thing is the back end. And with headless, another term comes into play, which is called decoupling. So when you think about these elements, so front end development or front end element of any web platform is the visual layer, what your end users see. On the other hand, we have the backend layer. The backend layer are the brains behind the operation. So all the functionalities, the logic. So some of these might include e-commerce management, inventory management, marketing automation system, reviews, checkout services when it comes to e-commerce projects. One of the very important things to bear in mind about backend is that all of these elements are presented as data, which is displayed through the front-end layer. And then, of course, we have decoupling. What do you think decoupling means in this sense?
Oh, I don't know how to say it right now. And decoupling. No. I won't try again.
Okay,
please
fair
explain.
enough. No problem. So decoupling essentially comes down to separating the two. one of the key differentiators between a headless platform and a monolithic solution is the ability to decouple, to separate the front-end layer from the back-end layer. So a lot of the specific solutions available on the market, some of them might be, for example, I don't know, WooCommerce, Magento Commerce, Adobe Commerce, Shopify. These are essentially monolithic traditional solutions, as we would call them. And why do you think we call them monolithic solutions?
That's clear for me too. Right now that they are their back end and the front end are monolithic, like you said, they put it together.
Yeah, exactly. They're very intertwined. They're very connected, and I think the best way to explain it would be using a very funny allegory, something like using Lego blocks. Every single one of us has been a child. We all played with blocks. Me personally, I love Lego. One of the best ways to understand the difference between monolithic and headless e-commerce is understanding that with monolithic solutions, you received one big chunk. It's one big chunk, which is intertwined very deeply. With the headless approach, you separate that into smaller elements. You separate the head, which is the visual layer, from the body, which is kind of the business logic and functionality. Therefore, that's where the term comes from. Headless simply means decoupling, separating those into two separate elements.
Great. I think that's the explanation that I and maybe our listeners also wanted, because those Lego bricks really comes in mind, and I can see it. So thank you very much for this explanation. Okay, so what are the main differences between a monolithic solution like Shopify or WooCommerce and Headless, and mostly what problems or maybe challenges does it solve? For me, let's say me as a e-commerce owner, what differences would it make for me?
So one of the main differences, kind of going back to what I said a little bit in just a second ago, I think one of the things that we should start with is maybe explaining what headless solutions are not. This will help us make sure that you do understand what headless is. So just to be completely transparent, headless, composable, Jamstack commerce. These are all terms operating in a very similar field. There are certain differences amongst them, but for today's conversation, I'll put them in the same bag. So headless, sure. Composable, Jamstack is not a specific solution. It's not WooCommerce. It's not WordPress. It's not Adobe. It's not Shopify. It's not a specific solution. What it is, on the other hand, is a completely modern and different approach to building digital products. Digital products that don't only include e-commerce storefronts, but you can also use this to create web applications. You can use this to create websites. It's part of a much broader movement in web development that's focused on adding a key element into the mix: flexibility and rapidness in developing these web platforms. For years now, over the past decades, a lot of different agencies, companies or internally or using external services have been creating websites in a way that's becoming more and more outdated now. They were not easy to manage, modify, create any additional elements in your e-commerce. Simply proved to be a challenge in the long run. One of the challenges that a lot of monolithic solutions, like the ones I mentioned previously, are facing is the ability to provide great performance, optimizing that performance to boost their SEO presence. Additionally, making any modifications in monolithic solutions typically did require certain involvement from developers. So you need to have technical resources for marketers to be able to modify anything. On the website, on the product pages, anything like that, adding new elements to the mix required a lot of additional work. And most importantly, the final drawback I just want to mention is in the visual layer. So in the head itself, using monolithic solutions proves to have certain limitations that limit the amount of customization and personalization that brands can bring into the e-commerce sphere. So one of the limitations of monolithic solutions that I want you to bear in mind is that they were created within specific technological stacks, which simply limit the amount of customization and integrations that these systems can have with other platforms, other solutions, and implementing specific features, functionalities within these e-commerce platforms is, of course, possible. You're allowed to do a lot of things within monolithic e-commerce solutions, but they can prove to take much more time. They can prove to require a lot more maintenance down the line. Because, for example, monolithic solutions were created in mind with a specific approach towards e-commerce. And creating customizations or modifying that fundament that a specific platform was created with might prove to be either A, impossible, or B, it might simply prove to take much more time than it would with the headless approach. So going back to my allegory with the blocks, like I said, with the monolithic solution, you receive one big block. Of course, you can add smaller blocks, but like I said, you still have that one big chunk that needs to work together. On the other hand, we have headless composable Jamstack e-commerce. So let's imagine what we take. We take a hammer and we break that monolith down. What happens is your entire e-commerce technological stack is divided into smaller pieces operating together. Pieces in the form of an e-commerce engine. For example, Shopify Plus is a great e-commerce engine that a lot of headless solutions use. You use CMS, content management system, that give the ability to easily manage all the content by non-technical team members. And then all the other elements that could be found in the back end of the monolithic solution, like inventory management, reviews. What you're able to do with the headless approach is make sure that you're not using out of the box or solutions provided to you by the monolithic platform. Instead, you have flexibility. You can investigate, find the specific solutions that work best for you and your specific business case, and easily integrate them into your technological stack with the use of APIs, application programmable interfaces. One thing I would really like you to remember here is that I'm about to give you a couple of examples of headless benefits, especially when compared to monolithic solution, but that does not necessarily mean that you can't achieve them within using the monolithic approach. You may be able to do so, but some of those drawbacks will simply prove to be more difficult or more time consuming to do so. Therefore, the costs of making any of these optimizations might prove to not really impact your business positively, as the costs are going to outdo some of the benefits. In general, monolithic solutions are simply less future-proof. They're less universal and holistic, meaning you might be able to, optimize a certain element or two elements of your online store, but that does not necessarily mean that you'll be able to achieve all of these benefits at the exact same time. Or if you do so, the sake of performance will be dropped, meaning the more you add into your monolithic solution, the performance, the speed, and therefore your SEO digital marketing strategy will be negatively affected. In headless, however, you receive all of these benefits combined from one another. This approach towards building e-commerce solutions was created in mind to give you the flexibility you may need and benefit the most out of these benefits or these functionalities you can. One of the key elements and key differences that we see between monolithic and headless solutions. With monolithic solutions, you have limited performance. Page speed is very hard to increase or improve in monolithic solutions. A lot of those monolithic solutions were created in mind, or were actually created over some even 20 years ago. The majority of them were created built on legacy code bases, legacy principles that are not necessarily applicable in today's world. Of course, monolithic solutions are updated, new versions, but the foundation layer, the base layer of that e-commerce engine, e-commerce solution still dates back. On the other hand, with the headless composable Jamstack approach, you can use some of the latest technologies, latest libraries, such as React, Vue, Next, Nux. You have the ability to use the technologies that were created in mind to be rapid, performative, and simply enable your solution to work the best possible. All of these performance attributes allow businesses to optimize their SEO strategy, because Google doesn't only look through the content, but it looks at the performance, the web core vitals. And I'll be more than happy following our podcast to share specific examples of projects that we at Naturaily worked with or worked on, and some of those scores that they receive. And I can guarantee you all of them are above 90, 95 scores. According to one of the latest Salesforce reports, it was a study conducted with over 4,100 respondents. So e-commerce brands, businesses of various sizes, various industries. So they asked them, what do they think about headless e-commerce? And 80% of those businesses in 2022 said that even though they currently do not have headless implemented, they are planning to do so within the next 2 years. So the large majority of these brands that were being discussed or questioned, they are or have going headless on the roadmap for the near future. What's more is that 95% of all companies that are aware of e-commerce, of composable Jamstack e-commerce, believe that's the way of the future, and that's the way that a business should operate. And you can verify this information in the Salesforce e-commerce report from 2022. So another great example is Nike. So over the past couple of years, Nike heavily invested into their digital presence, and they decided to create a custom e-commerce engine solution to enable them to go headless. Of course, their business being a corporate business, a large entity, one of the things that the headless approach enabled them to do is to invest in personalized experiences, adding augmented reality, virtual reality to the mix, giving them the ability to make those personalized, recommended experiences for their users. And by 2023, what they've seen is an increase in the digital penetration of the market raised by 30%. And a total of 30% of Nike's revenue was able to be increased due to the investment in digital technologies. And of course, I'm not saying that headless is the only thing that attributed to that, but it is one of the key elements that enabled that transformation to take place in that company. A couple more other examples, and I'm not going to go into the specifics, but a couple other examples of brands. For example, Lancôme, the French luxury cosmetics brand, Under Armour, the American sports brand, Samsung, Costa Coffee. All of these companies did at one point or another decide to go headless. And what they've all seen is an increase in customer revenue, in the order value. They've seen a boost in the website's performance, and they've seen an increase in the user engagement. So seeing how many people actually come back and not only purchase a product once, but come back and interact on a consistent basis with their brand. So if you're planning or looking to achieving these goals, like some of these brands have, headless is the way to go. And I know that I've mentioned some of the biggest players on the market, but just to confirm, the reason why I did so is because all of us practically know these brands. However, headless, Jamstack, composable e-commerce is not only meant for the largest players in the market. No, smaller and medium-sized enterprises, e-commerce brands are also investing in the Jamstack composable headless approach to e-commerce. 82% of respondents who have implemented a composable commerce approach anticipate a much lower cost of operations within simply 3 years. So like I said, once again, proving the point that if you do go into the headless architecture, there might be a little bit more of a cost up front, but the return of investment is there. It's simply down the line, and the benefits outweigh everything else that you're doing.
So let's say that you're receiving this kind of let's say, freedom from all these restrictions that you might have going with monolithic solutions, because it happens all the time that we want to implement something, but it won't work with our system, our CMS, and etc. etc. With headless approach, we get this freedom, this flexibility of using those tools, those kind of applications, plugins, you name it, that you want to. Like you said, in terms of content on your website, maybe some user experience. I think the list of potential possibilities here it's very, very long, and for e-commerce owners, it could be really like open-minded, because this view here is really, really, really far, and just to imagine all the things that you can do with your e-commerce, or not e-commerce, like you said, because it can be used also in other industries. It's really, for me, kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the best way to also understand it is, let's imagine you're creating from scratch. You decided to create your first e-commerce store. So when it comes to using monolithic solutions, there are typically two ways on how you can create the visual layer. So the front end, the element of the e-commerce store that typically attracts and is the defining element of your e-commerce platform, what the end users see, what they interact with. With monolithic approach, you have two options. The simpler, more basic option is using an available theme, templated themes. WooCommerce has hundreds of them. Shopify has hundreds of them.
Of course, thousands of them.
Exactly. All these platforms have specific templates that you can use. It's no problem. You can use them. But if you want to customize them, there are certain limitations to what you can do. So these limitations might prevent you to be able to edit, modify, and manage the content or elements of your online store exactly the way that you want them. Of course, some of these platforms that I mentioned, they have other limitations, visual limitations that you will simply not be able to jump over. And of course, you mentioned one very interesting thing in terms of using plugins. Having worked with a lot of customers, for example, operating on WooCommerce, I know that's a very common thing. And us as developers try to always tell customers to, in case you are using a theme, you're going to be using a lot of plugins, please try to limit it down to the minimum amount of plugins as possible. And being an SEO agency, I'm sure that this is something that happens very frequently with you guys. So one of the limitations that monolithic solutions like WooCommerce have is you do have thousands of plugins you can select from. But creating a technological stack based on plugins and implementing those plugins might prove to be a process which is extremely difficult to maintain. Why do I say that? Having 10, 15, 20 plugins doing different functionalities, updating your website and making sure that it's secure, it runs fast, it can simply mean that your developers, your team, your agency, instead of focusing on adding new functionalities, making your e-commerce unique against competitors, what they're actually going to be doing is just backlog work and try to update and make sure that everything is running smoothly. So those are some of the limitations. When it comes to using headless, you don't really face those. Why? Because like I said, you're using the best in-market tools, third-party tools, which are typically created, updated, maintained by actual companies. So for example, you have a search functionality. You can use, for example, Algolia. You have a reviews platform. You integrate these tools seamlessly into your technological stack, making sure that all the functionalities you really do need can easily be enabled on your online store. And how is that done? Because you have no limitations on the visual layer. Whatever your designers, whatever your idea is, you can bring it to life. You can create awesome designs, animations, make sure that your e-commerce solution really does reflect and kind of inspires your clients, your buyers, and make sure that their experience is simply much better than the one that they would have with those limited functionalities. Of course, one other thing that I just wanted to mention to make sure that I do say this as well, with the monolithic solution, you can of course create custom themes, but some of the challenges I mentioned will also be visible. creating a custom theme, you always have to bear in mind for every specific functionality. It might be more difficult to integrate a specific functionality within the limitations that, for example, Shopify, that, for example, Magento is limiting you to. With headless, those limitations are gone.
So this is the time when you can have your e-commerce, your shop, or your website the way you imagine it at the beginning. Because as I spoke, they work with our clients, with e-commerce owners. The first part when they are planning to open the new e-commerce, they get this vision of how it would be, of all these functionalities that they can apply to them. But in the end, when it comes to choosing, let's say Shopify or WooCommerce, it has to face this wall of restrictions, of limitations, and this kind of a dream. I don't want to say that drops out, but it's not like they imagine. But with the headless approach, it can really be done. But let's talk for a moment about cons of headless e-commerce. Are there any situations, maybe industries, that it's not worth using headless e-commerce? Or is it always good, or is it always good fit for every project? How does it work?
So when it comes to the limitations, of course, every solution has, pros and cons. That's sure. How it goes. That's the world that we live in. So one of the cons, I would say, you do need to have a great team. Like you mentioned, for example, starting your collaboration with an agency is an extremely important element of the mix. They need to have understanding of your business goals. You need to have defined what it is exactly that you need in order for an agency to be able to present these options to you. One of the key elements of this mix is with WordPress, with WooCommerce, with Shopify. It's quite easier for a non-technical person to set up shop themselves. I'm not saying it's going to be a perfect store, but it is easier to do so. When it comes to the headless approach, there is a little bit more complexity to it. So selecting that e-commerce engine, selecting the CMS, selecting out of all the tools that you can, selecting the ones that address your business requirements the best, it is a little bit more complex. You need to be able to, verify specific elements, make sure that they are what you're currently looking for. So the go-to market for the initial launch of a headless store might in fact be a little bit bigger than when launching with a monolithic solution. But at the same time, one thing that I do want to highlight is recently one of our partners, and this is to be completely honest, this is not an e-commerce store, but rather a website. One of our partners, Storyblock CMS, quite recently published a case study with Forrester Consulting where they actually implemented the headless approach within the company, and they tracked KPIs, they tracked their ROI. Can you guess what the ROI of investing into a headless solution was after 3 years? That's the span of the study itself.
3 years.
3 years. What the ROI of implementing a headless solution was?
I make a guess at 5 to 6 times.
Yeah, very close. It was 582%. Exactly. Perfect. So what I was referring back to is that although there may be a little bit more of a cost up front, you're setting up yourself for success due to some of the benefits that headless, composable, Jamstack e-commerce brings to the table. Because maintenance costs will go down, and while you scale, attract more clients, more partners, you build out your e-commerce solution, scalability will not be a problem the way it is with monolithic solutions. So that's one of the kind of, I would say, minor drawbacks. One of the final drawbacks that I could mention is, and I'm going to be completely transparent, if you're just starting your e-commerce journey, you want to launch a small store, you have 10, 15 products, headless might not be the option to go. Especially if you're just starting out, you're kind of verifying some of your business ideas, business goals, and you're trying to get to know the industry a little bit better. It might simply be a little bit of an overkill to try to combine all these elements. But at the same time, if you are a business that has been operating in the market over the past year or 2 years, and you've already defined some of these pain points that you can see, for a lot of those, headless might be the exact answer that you want. And I think in order to really understand what those might be, we can actually go over some of the comparisons and differences between a standard monolithic solution and building a store using the headless approach.
So to sum up a little bit, the entry level, let's say that way, is kind of higher when you are trying to do with a headless approach. The entry level of your knowledge in terms of programming your team, and also the cost that you will have to pay if you will try to bring the new e-commerce within headless solution. So it's worth to think about. But okay, let's say I'm an e-commerce owner and I'm already running my e-commerce, like you said, for a year or two, and I'm ready to make this change from traditional platforms to headless. How do you make this transition, and how long does it take? And can somehow we measure if the migration was successful or not?
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. So in order to really define whether you're ready to take this step into headless e-commerce, the first thing that you would need to do is really think about the why do you want to use headless e-commerce? That's essential for you to understand. What do you want to provide your end users, your buyers with that will differentiate your approach within the headless methodology against, for example, using a monolithic solution? When it comes to migrating, it's very straightforward. This is something that our agency does do on a quite frequent basis with a lot of customers, for example, using Magento, and they do decide to kind of move away from that platform. So one of the key elements is, of course, defining your business goals. In order to make sure that everything is measurable, you really need to define why you really want to make that transition. The second step, which I would probably recommend, is either, of course, in-house or talking to an outsourcing agency, a partner specializing in the e-commerce field, to really define which specific technological stacks or solutions do you want to include in your technological stack. Whether it's, personalized experience, whether it's, optimizing the performance, making sure your SEO is better, or giving your non-technical team members the ability to make more modifications and answer or be able to implement certain changes without the developers' involvement. Those are some of the things you really need to define. And of course, within the solutions that you select, when it comes to selecting a CMS, you also need to, for example, a content management system, you need to think about what functionalities would you like that content management system to have. Whether you want some live previews, whether you want, a visual builder, sort of like drag and drop. These are some of the things that you really do need to understand. And that's what I would start off with, thinking about what I need and either doing it by myself, doing some research, or working with a partner closely to define which are the solutions that the agency would recommend. Agencies typically work with, various brands. That's what they do all day. So using an agency might be a perfect choice. And then, of course, we get to the process itself of creating a headless storefront. So when it comes to the process itself, typically the way it works is it also comes down to whether the client's team would like to create the designs internally or whether they want to outsource some of the work as well. Because when working with customers, we've seen that this being the case for both options. Meaning sometimes we have designers in-house that, want to create beautiful designs and they're just looking for a partner to take those designs and code them. Or they want a full agency to start off with, analyzing their business goals, their needs, and making sure that the designs they create reflect their brand, reflect what they want to showcase to their end buyers, and then start the development journey. Typically, it also, of course, comes down to the specifics. Like we say, the devil is in the detail. So, of course, it's quite difficult to say that in building a headless e-commerce is going to take a month. Based on our experience, what we've seen is that projects can range anywhere between a month to 3 months. With some larger platforms, it might even be 6 months. It all comes down to what specific functionalities, designs you want to have implemented. But then when working closely with your team over the next couple of months, what you can do is, of course, release it in stages. For example, you can release first a proof of concept, just some of the most basic functionalities with clearly defined KPIs. Then you build on top of that and add additional functionalities to boost that experience until you reach the stage where you have a final product. In order to measure the success of your migration, what you need to do is make sure that the KPIs that you set, the metrics, such as, for example, traffic, conversions, revenue, you make sure to track them over an extended period of time. And it's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to see the difference down the line. And of course, ultimately, the success will simply be measured by your business analytics. You're going to see whether that transition made sense for you. And I'm sure, and I can, of course, name some of these brands that have made that transition and some of the examples they've seen.
Great. So let's say that our main reason for doing this kind of transition should be also our KPI for measuring the success of it, because we're doing this because of that. So we would expect that in some period of time, like you name it, this thing will change. This KPI will get better and to meet our expectations. But let's continue our journey, like we started saying that I am the e-commerce owner. So let's say that we went through this transition. How about my clients? So the potential clients of my e-commerce. After this kind of transition, after switching to headless e-commerce, will it be something that user on page will notice that something is different? How would that kind of change affect them, if at all?
Well, it really comes down to, there are certain monolithic platforms that have great performance. They're fully optimized. It's just much more difficult to keep that as optimized as you would in the headless approach. But based on our experiences, based on what our clients have seen, one of the key differences is simply improved website performance. Performance in terms of faster loading speeds, smoother navigation throughout the sites, and a much more responsive experience. Additionally, one of the key elements that is crucial here is the ability to provide your customers with something that they won't necessarily, it is possible, once again, it's a little bit more difficult, but providing more personalized experiences. And here, maybe I'll just ask you a question. So imagine you're on a store, you're buying something, and then you purchase something, and then you receive an email, following up, hey, thanks for your order. How about you check out these items? Or simply a pop-up appears throughout the site. What do you think you're more likely to find interesting? Whether these are recommendations made based on your user behavior. We have solutions in the headless approach that give you the ability to use AI, which is a very interesting trend right now, but to analyze all the elements that a specific user does on the website to feed them with either personalized product recommendations, customized pricing options, just to make the entire process a little bit different than what they experience on other standard brands. That's one of the ways that you can gain more inclusivity from your buyers rather than using a standard monolithic approach. And of course, the main thing you're going to see is typically the difference on the visual layer. So the visual layer can look exactly how you would want your end users to interact with your store. Once we get rid of those limitations of a monolithic solution, you can do whatever you want. Better experiences mean better conversion rates. An additional element of the headless Jamstack composable e-commerce approach is the ability to deliver those experiences, those personalized experiences across multiple channels. So imagine you have an online store. Imagine you have a store in a retail store somewhere. You're able to use your setup to manage multiple elements of your entire technology. An additional benefit of this, especially living in the mobile-first world, headless e-commerce and using the headless Jamstack composable approach to building e-commerce solutions gives you the ability to also create progressive web apps. What a progressive web app basically is kind of packaging your web application into the form of a mobile application and giving the users the ability to download it onto your phone. And it gives you the ability to interact and use those functionalities, such as push notifications and other device-related elements in the mix as well.
Okay, so maybe to sum up today's topic, can you discuss any specific examples of brands switching to headless and impact they've seen in their businesses?
Yes, I can. Exactly. And a great example that comes to mind is the British fitness apparel brand Gymshark. So this is based on an actual case study published on Shopify Plus. Shopify Plus is an e-commerce engine solution used in the headless Jamstack composable approach. So what Gymshark was using was they were in a monolithic Shopify store. Of course, when they began selling more, growing more, Shopify proved that some of the functionalities, they weren't able to implement those easily there. So what they decided to do is move over to Magento, Adobe Commerce. They were working on the store, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere between 6 to 8 months to implement. They were, allocating large amounts of budget into creating a new online store. And great, once they did so, throughout those 8 months, their brand continuously grew. The amount of customers, orders that were being processed through their online store proved to be a lot bigger than previously. So once they launched their new store with the monolith, with Adobe Commerce, the site, due to its lack of scalability, crashed. It crashed for 8 hours. It cost their business over £100,000 for their website to be not live for a single 8-hour period of time. So imagine now if you have other brands and how much their sales can be affected. So what they decided to do, and in the meantime, of course, Shopify released Shopify Plus. So one of the things they did is within a couple of months, they were able to make that smooth transition into Shopify Plus, and they've been growing ever since. Because one of the key elements that headless solutions have over monolithic solutions is scalability. So with any traffic spikes, with sudden surges of sales, for example, you're running a promotional, time event, Christmas, Black Friday, you can expect that this is a common trend across the industry, especially after the past couple of years with COVID, with the increase in e-commerce popularity.
Of course.
You can expect large surges of traffic. So if your monolithic solution hasn't been set up in mind with scalability, you will be facing crashes, bugs, timeouts of your website, which can effectively, like in the case of Gymshark, really do impact your business. On the other hand, with the headless approach, the architecture or the technology operates in a little bit of a different way. We don't have a traditional server where every single person that accesses your store opens up a product. It's all the data is being fed from one database. Instead, what the headless Jamstack composable commerce element uses or solution uses is using third-party software, such as, for example, CDNs, content delivery networks. And what content delivery networks are, and I'm not going to go into any very, very technical details, but just what I want you to remember is that these are servers spread out across various locations throughout the globe. So imagine I have an online store somewhere in Poland and someone in New York, for example. 6 hours, 6 hour difference, hundreds of thousands of kilometers difference. They're accessing my online store. They're trying to purchase something. One of the drop sides or downsides of me having my servers located somewhere in this part of the world is that it might take more time for them to feed those details to his experience online. Using CDNs, a person in New York is going to be connected to a server that's closest to them. And at the same time, if a visitor, for example, goes on my online store in Poland, they're going to be connected to the one closest to us. So we get rid of that kind of traditional monolithic database architecture. Instead, we use all the elements that Jamstack headless composable e-commerce provide us with to the benefit to make sure that the performance is as quick, as smooth as possible. This simply gives you the ability to make sure that you don't have any maintenance challenges and you don't have any problems when, for example, bug fixing, creating, you can limit down the amount of, for example, server errors or runtime errors, etc., by making sure that all of these elements of your e-commerce store are spread across different services. And this gives you the ability to simply reflect and make sure that any business decisions that you have to make, any changes you have to make in your online store, you don't have to implement them across the entire store, like within a monolithic solution, but you can simply focus on one specific chunk, giving you the ability to beat your competitors and go to market quicker. Sorry to overwhelm you with some of these information, but once you really do understand the headless e-commerce approach, I think you'll be able to really clearly see all the benefits. And just to summarize those, these benefits are flexibility and creating or using a technological stack that is future-proof. You're going to be able to easily modify, update, add new functionalities or integrations as you go, with getting rid of the limitations of the monolithic solutions. By using the latest technologies, you're going to be able to easily find developers that will be looking to help you, whether it's in-house, whether it's working with agencies. You're going to be able to work with some of the leading developers and make sure that these developers are as engaged in the project as possible. Everybody loves working with new technologies. Headless gives you that ability. Therefore, you can expect your code quality to significantly increase. What's most important is you can make modifications on the go. I've already mentioned this, but the headless approach and using third-party integrations as elements of your e-commerce technological stack gives you the ability to change a specific module, a specific block, instead of updating the entire monolithic solution, changing one element instead of modifying everything. Headless, Jamstack, composable e-commerce websites are much quicker to work, but they're also quicker to implement new functionalities. So the reduction in costs comes in the form of developing your website, maintaining your online store, but at the same time, it allows you to boost your performance, your web core vital scores, which will prove to work better on your SEO strategy and digital marketing strategy, attracting new and more customers.
Great, Konrad. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think that's all for today. And to our listeners, if you have any questions regarding today's topic, please let me know at spotlight@icea-group.com, or you can reach directly to Konrad. How can our listeners contact you?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me via LinkedIn or email. Feel free.
Great. See you, or rather hear you next episode. Bye.
Thanks.